All right, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start off with the roll call. McKee here, Schultz.
Here.
Behrenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
And John, I believe, is not going to be here tonight?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
he was, not sure if he was going to be excused, but we knew that he might be.
Gotcha, that works. We'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance, if you want to stand and join me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. Agenda approval. Do we have anything from staff? I think at least one thing.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have a couple items on the dais for council, one related to credit card processing, our contract, a financial analysis for that. We have some job descriptions and a resolution for the Public Works reorganization under number 9. And then we're asking for one additional item, number 10F. It's for the purchase of a plow due to some repair work that's happening. So we'd be asking for that as 10F tonight.
Okay. Anything from council? No? All right, then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of 10F.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Commission representatives, we have Corinne Drummond from Planning and Alicia Hoffman, Parks and Trails, I believe virtually.
Yes.
And we'll go right into open forum for any items not on tonight's agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Anyone who's in person is invited to fill out a comment card. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or press the reactions button and press raise your hand and we can recognize you. And Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand and we have not received any public comment cards from the audience.
Sounds good. If there's still nothing, then we'll go on to consent agenda, which consists of items 7A through 7L. Is there anything council would like to pull?
I'd like to pull item 7I and 7J, if I may, please.
7I and J. Okay.
And if I could, just a quick review on 7F.
And F. Okay. Sounds good. Then, so here, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items making it tricky this time.
Yes.
7A through H. No, I'm sorry.
E.
A through E, G, H, K, and L.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll go on to the first one, 7. Was it 7F? Thank you. The Mangan preliminary plat and final plat. And do you have some questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd given Jessica the heads up. A few of the neighbors talked about building rights and those kind of things, and I was wondering if we could get someone to re-explain those building rights related to this development. I understand them. The person, I'm not sure if they're online, but when someone makes a statement to me like, hey, money talks kind of deal, that kind of trips my trigger, and I want to make sure if there is anybody online from that neighborhood, I want to make sure they understand it. So if we could just talk building rights on that, and then I'll motion to approve that as far as a consent item type deal.
Sure.
Perfect. Thanks, Dean. I do have Natalie Davis online. She was going to speak to that item for us as well. And I do have a copy of the plat on the screen there as well.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So the development rights, and I think there is some confusion because we seem to interchange the terms development rights and buildability.
Right.
And it technically is two different concepts. So basically, the plat that Westwood Gardens, which is where 9247 Trailhaven Road and 9257 Trailhaven Road were created, these lots became parcels became lots of record. And the buildability is implied because they're no longer an outlot, they are a lot. And that is just inherent when you have a plat and you have lots of records, they can be built upon, whereas anything that is an outlot is unbuildable per our city code definition. So these lots can both be built on, but the Aussies who own both of these parcels currently only built a single-family home on 9247 Trailhaven and pretty much purchased 9257 Trailhaven because they didn't want someone to build there. They wanted that for their own yard. And they never did anything, and they have no intention to do anything. The outlot above the north, to the north, was platted as an unbuildable outlot when that was still allowed per our city code. We have since updated it because it became very confusing and hard to administer. And so that is kind of something we have in a few places in our city, but we aren't really creating too many more of these outside of an open space and preservation plat. The reason why we can reassign the buildability of the 9257 lot is because it is adjacent. And we can replat these parcels together. And basically, any buildability and development rates are pooled together, and then we can reassign. So the way that we can do that is we need to combine 9247 Trailhaven and 9257 Trailhaven to one lot that can never be subdivided again. There will only be one family home. And then the buildability is reassigned to the outlot, and that becomes a plotted or a lot of record in the new preliminary plat, and final plat, I apologize. But that's basically, in this situation, it was kind of on a really micro scale, but Bechtold Farms is an example of something that recently went through Planning Commission and Council, where there were 8 development rights on the northern parcel and 4 development rights on the southern parcel. They were platted together. They're adjacent lots, so you can do that. You can plat them together. The development rights basically became one pool of 12 rights, and instead of putting 4 on that southern parcel, as the map shows, we only put 1 there and 11 parcels on the northern piece, and that was because it made sense due to the topography and the accessibility of those parcels, basically. So it is something that we have done in the past where if it's adjacent and it can be platted together, we can reassign the rights as it makes sense in the plat.
Yeah, that's perfect, Natalie. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Jessica, for pulling that together. Essentially, it's 3 lots, changing it to 2, and since they're adjacent, they could have 2 building rights, so to speak, one on the one lot, one on the other. So thank you very much for explaining that. I don't know if that person is online, but not seen in our public group here. So thank you for that time.
Thanks, Natalie.
One comment maybe for staff is that when you have questions from people inquiring about property, where there's no building right, make sure you include the segment about surrounding properties and how building rights can be acquired through the cooperation of people that have building rights around them. They can't be granted by the city, but because if you're only inquiring on that one, maybe that's where you have this mindset that nothing will ever be built there.
Right.
Sure, that's great feedback, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
It might be worth putting together some kind of a fact sheet that you would send out when you get inquiries, or even just have it somewhere on the planning section of the website so that we can refer people to that when they question things like this in correspondence.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Can look into that.
Mr. Mayor and Council, and I will say that is something that I do caveat, especially since this has come up. This is one of the first planning things that I ever did for the city. But and since things come up, I always caveat with that when I'm speaking to people on the phone. And I did include that in the original staff report for the development rights appeal on this outlot, that we do, the only way that buildability could be reassigned is if there was an adjacent lot that has it. So I'd be happy to put a fact sheet together. I think that's a great idea. It'd be helpful even for internal processes, but we do have that in our practice currently.
Perfect.
And then just one more question, Natalie. The two property owners that were questioning this with me, they spoke and told me they got no notification of anything like this happening. They were completely surprised and such. What is our policy as far as distance from things like this, as far as notification goes to neighboring landowners? Do we have a distance on so many feet and stuff? If you could just make sure I got the right number in my head, but for anybody else listening.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Van Camp, we do. We send out a mail notice to every property within 350 feet. I didn't receive any return mail notices.
Yeah.
So I assume everyone was mailed out. But we do that 2 weeks before the public hearing date. And we also put up a development sign, and technically we didn't need to, but I knew that there was going to be some commotion in the neighborhood, so I was trying to be transparent. So we did put up a development
You did very well,
sign.
Natalie. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure. If they're online, I want to make sure folks hear it straight away. So thank you very much for the time. And then can we just
Yeah, go right
accept that? I'll make a motion, since I was the one that brought that up, to accept that as a consent agenda item now. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We,
Motion, I do.
Motion from Van Camp, second from
Sorry
Nichols.
about
You're
that.
all right.
The quiet second. Okay. We'll go on to 7.
Aye, sorry.
I thought I had it right that time. You got me. 7I.
Okay, so I want clarification with regards to the staff report, where it talks about, it's in the second paragraph, BS&A suggested iCloud as a vendor for credit card processing services of all services with the exception of recreational items. So what I'm wondering is, a couple of things. BS&A and iCloud are business partners. If you look at iCloud's webpage, you'll see BS&A listed as a partner. So did they disclose the partnership when they suggested Invoice Cloud? And were there any other vendors that were vetted as far as services provided and cost to the city, so we could compare those to iCloud? Or I keep saying iCloud, it's Invoice Cloud, yeah.
So they didn't mention any other vendors, but based on my research, Brainerd also went for the same research, and BS&A did recommend either Invoice Cloud or Point and Pay with them, and Brainerd did a comparison between the two, and they picked Invoice Cloud just because it was more, it was friendlier to residents as well as staff, and it integrated better with BS&A. So, and then I did research into what other cities around the area use as well, and majority had used Invoice Cloud, and Maple Grove used Invoice Cloud. I found about 20 other cities around the area that also use Invoice Cloud. Otherwise, they use PSN, which actually merged with Invoice Cloud, so there is one company now. However, I do have experience on both Invoice Cloud and PSN, and Invoice Cloud is a much friendlier system.
And to your question, Alan, about did they disclose, they have 2 integrations with credit card vendors, and BS&A and Point and Pay were, Invoice Cloud and Point and Pay were the two options. When we told them what we were looking for in terms of the availability of email bills and some of the features, when we asked what would be a good service for that. They did recommend Invoice Cloud, but to Maggie's point, it was important for us to look at what other cities are using. We did not get quotes from Point and Pay.
I believe, did we look into them back in, was it 2016?
When we looked originally for different credit card vendors, I can't recall if they were one, but we did look at multiple credit card vendors when we started credit card processing in 2016.
Okay, but now we're more concerned about the integratability with BSNA, right? So is there any others that are integratable with BSNA that would have those features? I'm just a little concerned that we didn't expand our scope very wide to see what others were out there for a cost-benefit analysis, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was looking around to see what other vendors there were that other cities had used. There were a few others, but none that, like only one-off cities had used them, like Springbrook, but that's also an accounting system. And then I think there was another one called like Rough Spring, but only one other city had used it. So I think most cities make sure that it integrates with their accounting system, so it cuts staff time out from having to do journal entries, and it makes the reconciliation of the bank statement a lot easier.
If I remember right, Mr. Mayor, one of the big reasons we wanted to upgrade software was to reduce the manual effort involved in processing utilities. So unfortunately, I think with smaller cities, we don't have as many options. Remember when you were putting it out for quotes, we only received 2 back out of, I don't know how many proposal requests. So when we grow, maybe it would make sense to revisit if we feel like we're not getting the right integration or the right service or the right cost. But it seems like our options are relatively limited now, and this is the best of the two.
And to your point, really, there are only 2 credit card vendors that integrate without having to go through and rewrite the programming with BSNA. So that's why we were planning on going that direction. And Maggie, as a resident, has had good experience with them. I haven't been in a city where where I've had that, but.
I think Rogers has PSN. Dayton also just transitioned to BSNA, and they went with Invoice Cloud as well.
Gotcha.
What's the term of the contract we're signing with Invoice Cloud?
It's a 3-year contract, but our city attorney went through, and we went through a couple iterations with Invoice Cloud to ensure that we had some ways out of the contract. Maybe John can speak to that.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I can just say that we actually had a very pleasant negotiation with them. They really yielded to a lot of our requests in terms that I had fired back at them. And a lot of what I had done, so you're aware, was that you'll have your initial term of 3 years, as Jessica said, but there are several points in the agreement that you'll see where, prices can be adjusted for one reason or another. In each of those situations, what we pushed for was a right to terminate if that happens. So we have the out if the deal changes at any point during that initial term. So to Councilmember Nichols' point, you can evaluate it properly during that term. If the deal changes, you can get out. And if you're happy with it, you go on. If you're not, you reevaluate, in 3 years after the initial term.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I appreciate that. I just suggest then we monitor what other options are out there too, so that if we do decide to terminate, we're prepared to have somebody lined up in advance.
Makes sense.
And then the other question I had was with regards to, and staff provided this example, because the reference, I think we talked about in the fee schedule, was the percent charge, but there's also references in here about e-check charges and auto pay charges and whatnot, that those are being absorbed by the city. So I wanted to know what the impact was from a budget standpoint based on what we could forecast based on prior payments. So it looks like it looks like we're still coming out ahead, so I appreciate you putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on it?
No, so with that, I'll make a motion to approve both I and J. I pulled J because it references Invoice Cloud in the fee schedule.
Gotcha.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. That gets us through consent. Now we're on to planning business. We have a public comment opportunity, and this is for 8A, zoning amendment for assembly uses.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone joining us virtually can press star 9, click reactions, and click raise your hand, and we can recognize you. Otherwise, we do not have any comment cards from anyone in the audience for this particular item.
1 second here. There we go. Okay. So we've seen this plenty of times. There was a couple changes. Maybe we want to highlight the couple changes made at the last planning commission
Sure.
meeting.
Natalie, would you be able to do that for us?
Yes, I can. I have slides prepared and I highlighted everything in red that's new. So I tried to keep it organized for you. Perfect. So one thing I'll add that I didn't really include in the slides is Planning Commission wanted to clarify the definition of impervious surface. So that definition is in your packet. We're basically going with, we are going with the watershed definition just for sake of consistency. And as far as the actual standards, one thing that the Planning Commission settled on is that educational facilities and places of worship should not be eligible for the building and parking setback flexibility from county roads that we allow with the addition of more landscaping for other uses, but we're not going to allow that for this type of use in residential areas. Next slide. The landscaping zone also has had some changes to the language. We wanted to, or staff wanted to have a definition that provided some level of expectation without being too strict to avoid the need for variances when it doesn't make sense for the site. And the Planning Commission added that existing trees, shrubs, and vegetation should be allowed to meet the landscaping requirement if buffering is accomplished. Next slide. Then I did change the internal landscaping requirement for parking so that it kicks in at 3,000 square feet. The original language really didn't kick in until about 6,000 square feet. And then it increases by 100 square feet for each additional 1,000 square feet. And the Planning Commission clarified that concrete curbing requirement can be replaced with comparable materials as approved by the city engineer. And last slide. And then finally, the other change the Planning Commission recommended that it hasn't really been commented on by council yet is the safe harbor clause, which just clarifies the city's ability to exempt religious uses from any performance standards that are found to substantially burden religious uses without needing to formally change our policy beforehand. And that is it. So let me know what questions you have, and the city attorney is also here to help with any questions that might come up.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Natalie or for John?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
So as part of the proposed language, item 6, site access, can you tell me how does this compare to the existing ordinance? And does this change address the conditions for denial of the previous applications we would have seen? I'm not gonna say what the application is. I personally don't think we should talk about former applications when we talk about ordinances. But
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Schultz, I don't see that that is a current requirement for places of worship in our ordinance. This is something that was identified to be added last October 2020. So this is where that language is coming from, but it's not currently in our code. And then as far as whether or not that would help conditions, one major complaint is that this road can't accommodate the traffic. So this would be our roads that are able to accommodate higher loads of traffic, that we would be requiring them to be adjacent, if not near to. I'm sorry, near if not adjacent to.
Do you have any other questions on that?
Well, okay, so if I read this, well, one part is 6B, should it really say no more than 1,000 square feet from an intersection?
Oh, yeah, just 1,000 feet. Right?
And then,
Good
I
catch.
would think so, I couldn't verify.
can you give an example of a major collector or minor collector road in the city?
Yeah, let me pull up our map and the comprehensive plan.
I don't think there was any maps included with staff report, was there? No.
I did not, I apologize, my computer isn't working, so everything's kind of downloading from the cloud, because I'm on Brad's old computer. So I'm waiting for it to download. I don't have that pulled up right now.
If we have one of the packets that included my memo, it should have that in it.
I'll look for that. 1 second.
I want to say, the titles of the roads did get a little confusing, or what categories they all were.
Yeah.
It looks like, I'm looking at the comp plan, major collector, Meister Road and County Road 10, classified as a major collector. Minor collector would include Hackamore and Gleason and Horseshoe Trail and Larkin Road and Shuddy Road and Stieg Road are all classified that way.
So, for example, the intersection where the previous application was, would still fall within this definition?
For that part, I believe so, I would think. Right?
I believe so.
When this one was originally proposed, this version of this kind of control, I did try to chart it out as best I could.
Yep.
It would not have been entirely prohibited, but the size footprint would have been constrained by the setbacks. So there would have been modifications to the nature of the proposal, but it could have been made to work with an appropriately sized facility.
I think the question was just about the 1,000 feet, though, from the intersection, right?
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering, how does this regulation or this update, how does it address the issues that caused the previous denial? Previous denial was based upon infrastructure not being adequate, and yet we're using language that would seem like the infrastructure is adequate.
I would think that that one
Yeah.
wouldn't directly apply in
In this-
that case specifically, but just in general. Are you thinking you'd be more comfortable with just removing 6B
Yeah.
and just having it be direct access to the major principal arterial, minor expander, minor connector?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure whatever we're doing addresses what the issue was
Sure. And if,
with that denial.
sure. If,
And I think that was a conversation at one point that we could remove that 6B.
Yeah. Yep, I think we certainly could. I think if infrastructure, we'd want to make sure if the 6B is related to making sure that the infrastructure is there to support the assembly use, that might make sense, but
But B, it really isn't the issue about the feet, right? And A is the one that refers to all the roadways.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I think that is, we certainly could take it out. It's, Natalie, do you have any thoughts or concerns about taking out 6B?
I think we're just really limiting what site would be potential, and I think Hackamore Road, if we're talking about Hackamore Road not being able to accommodate it, I do believe that from the city engineering standpoint, there was some disagreement on that my understanding is that it could accommodate that traffic. And these are also the roads that are going to most likely be updated because they're seeing more development nearby. So we can definitely make that change. I'm concerned about overly limiting where they could be placed.
Well, I mean, let's leave it then. I just wish this would have addressed the issue that was brought up for reasons of denial.
Or does that, changing that 1,000 feet number help us there?
Well, the only thing I would say is you'd almost have to limit it less than 1,000 feet.
Right. Yeah.
At which point,
At a certain point, the county or whoever might not gonna let that be that close to a intersection.
well, right, but even on Hackamore, you become an issue, it's not a county road, but it's
Right.
an issue of how close can you actually be to an intersection,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah. Which yeah.
I'm fine just leaving it as it is right now. I just
Okay.
wish it would have addressed that.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think you did raise a good point, though, Ellen. It should be feet, not square feet. That's a
Well, for sure.
typo to fix, for sure.
Yeah.
Where is the square feet?
6B, the site will have direct access to a major collector or minor collector roadway no more than 1,000 square feet, should just be 1,000
Ah.
feet from intersection. Any other questions or comments on?
I had kind of the same one, but then I had another one too. I want to make sure the way this is, hello? We still got an echo, don't we? When I read this, Natalie, I don't read anything related to tying the hands of the Lions Park. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen. It's close to residential, it's close to all of those things, but none of this ordinance would apply to the events at the Lions Park. Am I correct in saying that? I'm a huge
Mr. Mayor.
advocate there, so.
Yep, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Van Camp, I need to look at how Lions Park is zoned at the moment. Regardless of this ordinance going in, there would be, if they are zoned residential, there would be a legal non-conforming use, so they would be able to continue operating as is. However, I don't think they are zoned residential.
I think they're public institutional.
I think so,
I think so.
if we do something, I want to make sure it doesn't cross over to something that's
So,
already existing.
yeah, Lions Park is zoned as a planned unit development, so
Oh.
they have a different set
Okay.
of rules that apply to them.
And then the more I think about Alan's question and such, I think this ordinance has done things a lot to make it, when I look at all of the changes in this and such, at the point of discussion being that corner of Hackamore and 101, a facility going in there of the appropriate size and stuff, this wouldn't impact an appropriate size type deal. I think another thing that was happening that was oversized, overparked, just a ton of things. And the biggest thing that we could, when I was on the planning commission, the only thing we could really say was the accessibility of the traffic and stuff, with no accessibility to 101 and Hackamore just not being up to snuff. I think that was a recommendation to the council saying that. And then whatever the council had after that was another thing. But when I read this, it doesn't tie our hands at all, and we still can accept any institutions, gathering type deals, anything in any one of our areas. as long as they're reasonable size. So,
Yep. Yeah, I think it strikes that balance well of
Yep,
giving the flexibility, but giving some protection against something that's just too big in the spot.
that's all I had. Thank you.
Anything, Jeremy?
No.
All right, then I will go ahead and entertain a motion. Let's see if we can do this all together here. To adopt ordinance 2021-445, amending, am I in the right spot? Yep, amending sections 1020.020, 1040.040, .045, .050, .060, and .070, and approve resolution 2021-141 approving findings of fact.
Second.
Any discussion?
Is your motion including the grammatical error?
Good catch, thank you.
We'll
Oh.
correct that grammatical error.
You can just correct
Under
that.
Under 6BB.
Okay, don't need the motion to reflect that? Just a,
We'll correct.
Perfect.
The grammatical error.
okay. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then we have the, I'll make the motion to adopt ordinance 2021-446 for summary publication.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. On to unfinished business. We have another public comment opportunity. This is for item 9A, which is the Public Works Reorganization Phase 1.
Mayor, one other thing that we would need to do if we can approve the findings of fact.
I did.
Did you?
Part of the same, so two
Oh,
or
sorry
two in the
about that.
first motion. We should be good.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. Okay, Public Works reorg. Kevin, you wanna, or,
Are we doing that? Was there anyone online? that
Did you
wanted
want to do
speak?
the public comment opportunity?
Probably should.
Sure.
I did.
Did you? Oh my goodness, I'm just losing it. There's no one online.
Okay.
No one's joining us. I apologize.
No worries.
I'm a little behind.
We're just a little out of sync, not a problem.
Okay, so Kevin?
Were you leading this one?
Yep, I
You
can
want-
lead
And then
this
I can
one.
follow up?
So, Mayor and Council, we presented in July of 2021 an organizational structure shift for the Public Works Department. What we're presenting today is phase one of that reorganization. So that is a review of the Public Works Director job description to get it in line with current duties, the creation of a Public Works Operations Supervisor and the Operations Superintendent. Currently, we do have a Public Works Operations Superintendent, but this position would be, the superintendent position would move up and the Operations Supervisor would be underneath that. So it's the creation of one position overall, and that's phase number one. And then phase number two was the addition of an administrative assistant or building permit technician, and then a development superintendent. There is a future not proposed at this time, phase to the reorganization that's a utility superintendent, but those are the positions that we proposed in July and incorporated into the budget for council. We did create the job descriptions and then have them scored by our consultant, George Gamak, who's done all of the scoring to ensure that we're making pay equity and making sure that we have a job evaluation system. So we had those job descriptions scored. They ended up scoring, the Public Works Director ended up scoring at a grade 19, Operations Superintendent at a grade 15, and Operations Supervisor. It is listed on the slide as Manager, but George suggested we change that to Supervisor. And that graded at a grade 13. We are proposing to make the change to Kevin's job description as is and appoint Operations Superintendent as Pat Meister, who's currently serving in the role of Public Works Superintendent, and then Brandon Hines, who is currently serving in the role of crew leader as Operations Supervisor. And then also asking for authorization, as we've moved Brandon up to go and backfill his role as crew leader. We would also anticipate Phase 2 coming to council sometime in early 2022. And we've not created any of those job descriptions, although we have it in the budget. We'd be looking for authorization to hire at that time. That's a bit about the background and where we're at and what we're proposing tonight. Kevin is here if you have any questions and can speak to the proposal. Otherwise, I am here as well.
Perfect. And I would assume utilities would come on about the same time as water, once we had that figured out.
Yes, once we
We had
have the.
utilities for them to supervise.
Yes, once we have that water treatment facility, I think that's when and water tower would be kind of when we're looking at adding that. It's been in the plan as a 2023, 2024, depending on when we actually finalize the water supply system.
Makes sense.
And no, excuse me, the utility superintendent would really be funded through the enterprise fund, so it's a little less impact to the general budget. So it's a little more, we can pick and choose when it makes sense to run our program.
Yeah. Makes sense. Any questions for Kevin or Jessica? Or yours?
So, Mayor, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
Sure.
right ahead.
So the 3 individuals slotted for these spots, do they currently meet the minimum requirements?
Yes. Because there's an or equivalent, yes. Portion?
It's not, I don't read it as or, it's and. Job requires an associate's degree and 5 or more years.
Running on the operations supervisor?
Yeah, that one, and then the other one says requires an associate's degree and 8 or more years.
I think the equivalent's down below, or equivalent,
Or
kind of a
equivalent,
long
yeah.
extension, that's how it's
Yes,
looked
or
previous.
equivalent is at the
Yeah, but I think
end
the
of
or it shouldn't be and, then it should be or. The job requires an associate's degree or 8 or more years.
I think it's saying
I think
the
it's
first
both,
thing is
or
altogether
equivalent.
or the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
Yes. That's how
Right.
our other job descriptions have been written, so that's how
Gotcha.
how I went
It is a
off
little
of that
confusingly
for this,
worded.
but we certainly could
Yeah.
make that correction to make it
I would
or
suggest-
equivalent at the beginning.
I would say, yeah, you
We-
change the wording so it's clear,
We could do that.
because I don't want somebody coming back later and say, these people
They
don't
weren't
meet.
qualified?
Yes, they weren't
Right.
qualified, you shouldn't have put them in there.
Is it just on that one, or is there similar?
It would be on both the superintendent and the supervisor, and we can make those clerical changes to
Okay.
that, but that's a great,
Yeah, even the
Make it more
director one
clear.
says and.
I think it probably applies to all of them,
okay.
Yeah.
just because that's been the way it's been written in all our job descriptions, so it's a great point. We'll probably have to make that change
Yeah.
anytime we have an update.
Yes.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I think
can
that's
wordsmith it,
how most of them had been, so we'll make that change. Thank you for that
Perfect.
suggestion.
Good catch. Anything else?
Just not a lot of work to get to this point. Thank you very much. Do we as council or we as a city, do we have to post these positions and those kind of things? Is there any legalities related to that? I don't want anybody coming back at us saying, I'm more qualified than, why didn't I get it instead of? That makes sense.
Sure. So there's a variety of different ways that we can fill positions. In the past, we've done open recruitments, internal recruitments, and then some reorganizations and reclassifications like this. And this falls in that reclassification
Okay.
portion. The city attorney's nodding his head. We have been keeping him in the loop of any hiring we do, but it's always on a case-by-case basis. If we feel like we have a position or a change that we can make, we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis, and it really
Okay.
depends on the applicants and where we feel like we can do it. But it's a little bit in our wheelhouse to be able to make that determination, but certainly would want the support of council anytime we move forward with a particular hiring style.
Thank you. Just a question. Thank you, sir, very much. John?
All right. Give me a look. Anything else or no? Okay.
The only other thing I would suggest is I don't have much experience with public entity job descriptions, but from a private entity standpoint, this is like a novel. If you can condense these things down.
That is a great feedback. It a little bit plays into what we have to do for job evaluation, because we need to make sure there's about 8 different pieces that go into the job evaluation, and it's really important to have a somewhat lengthy job description in there. I know it's not ideal from a reading perspective, but it's definitely important just to make sure that we're keeping that job evaluation and making sure we're able to line that up for the pay equity piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2021-143, amending the organizational structure of the Public Works Department with the minor change to the job descriptions that Alan pointed out.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. On to new business. We have another public comment opportunity. This is for 10AB, CD, technically E, if you had a comment on that, or 10F, which was added to the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. We have not received any comment cards here. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. The Mayor, at this time, no one virtually is doing so.
Perfect. Then we'll go right into 10A, which is the MS4 Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, and that's just the hearing portion of it, right?
Yeah.
That's all we're getting to today.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got Kevin all queued up to do a brief presentation on the program, so then we can hold our public comment opportunity.
Perfect.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Yes, this is really a requirement from the MPCA's MS4 permit, general permit. Once a year, we have to have a public input opportunity. Traditionally, we had it at Country Days, and with the pandemic and everything, we started allocating a brief time slot at the council meeting to highlight that and pay attention to it. This is essentially the slideshow we presented last year, so I won't go through it. It's in the packet. It's available. Essentially, it speaks to the program, raises awareness of what we're doing, and basically identifies how you can reach out and comment on it. So we have this information on our website year-round. We're just highlighting it. If you skip to the last slide right there, that's really where the updates begin. We've been going through this MS4 update, if you recall, last year. We received a new permit on October 22nd this year. So we do have some requirements that we have to put in place prior to 1 year from that point. So in the fall in 2022, we will have a deadline to kind of bring it into compliance. We've been working on this plan. You guys approved some of that last year. Some of the first phases of that will come in January, like the end of January, with an ordinance update that brings us into compliance. We're a compliance-based program. And with that, we're open to the public. If you guys have any questions, or the public does, my contact information's on there. And just as an update, last year, we received 0 comments through the whole year. So, with that, I'd be happy to go into any more detail or just open it up to anyone for comment.
Perfect. Anything from council?
I just have a question of what some of the new requirements are that are referenced.
Updating an ordinance is the first one. So we have, we'll be bringing forward, I think it's notice for the January Planning Commission, so it'll be the end of the second meeting in January. It's just an ordinance update related to how we manage different permit processes. That's the one I think that what needs the highest urgency. So more details to come related to that, but it's really process related and paperwork related. We have to make sure we're addressing the larger permit. And again, most of that we're doing already in terms of field management, but some of our ordinances need to be cleaned up to achieve that. So it's more of a technical formality to come into compliance.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have a question also.
Go right ahead.
Kevin, how does the ordinance updates and the next steps in this permitting process mesh with your program, our program, to look at a stormwater area charge to start being able to remediate some of the older infrastructure for handling stormwater in the city?
That's a great question. I think they're really independent, right? Because the permit is what we're focused on, what we have to do in terms of the MS4 permit. Where they interweave is how do we pay for that? So that's the connection is, okay, how does a potential stormwater area charge, how are we able to utilize that to help pay for some of our obligations? So they're independent in terms of operation, but they're connected in terms of how we pay for them. Right now, we pay for everything MS4 out of the general fund.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Mhm. Thank you.
You raising your hand, Dean, or
Nope,
stretching?
just rubbing. Thank you. Thanks for paying attention, but, no, a lot of work. Good job.
Do we need to have a public hearing open, or is it
It's not
just-
technically a public hearing, it's really just an opportunity to raise awareness.
Gotcha.
And if no one's here, that's good. And then again, reminder, it's always on our website, that you can submit a request or request additional information. So it's not a formal, it's just a public opportunity to raise awareness.
Sounds good. Is there anyone online that's looking to speak?
No, not at this time.
Okay, and we'll just keep chugging along. 10B, 2022 Strategic Planning Goal Setting Session.
Perfect, thank you, Mayor and Council. We went out this year and I solicited proposals from 2 different groups to complete our goal setting and strategic planning. The 2 groups were from Phil Kern, who's done our strategic planning the last few years, and then Hugh Life, who I've worked with in other cities, and they've conducted some strategic planning in other cities that, like Chanhassen and a few other cities that you know of. And based on the proposal, at this time, I'd recommend Phil, based on just the cost proposal, as the other proposal is a per session fee. So I thought I'd want to stick within budget, and we've seemed to have pretty good luck with Phil. So what I'm proposing tonight is for us to engage Phil Kern. I did do a doodle poll of council, and I've not gotten any date that's really quite working, so I'm going to try redoing the poll with a couple other times and see if we can get something that will work for council, and then we can send out to council that date, and I can work with the mayor on noticing it if it's going to be closer to the 13th, the January 13th meeting. Otherwise, if it's going to be later than that, we just put it on the schedule to call that meeting on January 13th.
Perfect. Any thoughts on that? I think Phil did a good job last year. We're familiar with him.
I would agree.
Well.
If it's 3,000
Yeah,
per
that
session,
too.
that's a bigger difference than I anticipated from reading the proposal. So I would agree Phil is appropriate.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve, or to engage the services of Phil Kern for the strategic planning and goal setting session sometime in early 2022, date TBD.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 10C, cost share agreement for grading and sub-regional stormwater design for City Center Drive and 79th Place improvements.
Perfect. Mayor, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin for this one.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I apologize for the long heading, but it's necessary to define the project. If you recall, about middle of last year, we did a feasibility study for City Center Drive and 79th Place, as shown on the screen here. It's essentially the new roads that would support our north end of our downtown area, which is connected with the St. Therese development. So on the screen here, this is kind of the feasibility level grading plan. We're positioning ourselves to be in place for the final plat of St. Therese. And so this is somewhat close to what the actual grading plan would look like for our portion of the work. It could change, but it's the best schematic we had. So essentially what's happening is we are charged with building this project. St. Therese is charged with doing the site grading on their 13-acre parcel. And to do a project on top of each other like this would just be essentially a nightmare. You're duplicating design. We still have to coordinate the design anyways. You're duplicating permitting. You're challenged with the amount of earthwork balance that you can do and capitalize on that comprehensive design. We can achieve some of the densities we're looking for in our downtown plan by converting all the stormwater into a pond across the road. We can have better reuse and stormwater across it from a larger pond and be more effective. So there's a ton of advantages to doing a comprehensive plan. We worked with the city attorney in St. Therese on a cost share agreement that would get us through design and bidding only, and that would be proposed to be split 50-50. The proposal from Stantec, the city's engineering firm, is in there. At the point of bids, we would have an opportunity to reevaluate, likely through the design process. We could establish the ultimate proportionality between the projects. It's a combination of, amount of impervious for stormwater and amount of actual earthwork being moved on a volume basis. We can establish that. For example, if it comes back 60% St. Therese, 40% city, when we execute phase 2 of the agreement, we anticipate doing that with all the cost savings. When that happens, we do have an out. When that happens, we could retroactively go back and apply that to the construction and design, basically true up and reconcile the contract. And that's kind of detailed out in there. That's our intention. Again, if it doesn't work out, we can back out. We're committed to the design, but both parties believe it's extremely advantageous to go this route. It saves on schedule, and with that, I'd be happy to, I guess I'd propose the recommendation that we move forward with approving the cost share and the proposal from Link, and I'd be happy to answer any more questions.
Any questions for Kevin?
I have one.
Okay.
I know we talked about this pond serving a larger area. When, say, the parcels on the other side of 116, if they were to develop, would that be included in this region for that pond, or would that have its own separate system?
It's likely, on the west side of 116, it would likely be a different pond because the drainage patterns go west from there. We had previous conversations about potentially incorporating more properties to the south. That could still be something that comes up. This plan does not integrate that. That's why it's a sub-regional, maybe more than a regional. It really encompasses our right-of-way and our road, the pass-through that's coming, and then the new impervious. So we would likely, if it makes sense, oversize it to the extent, if we have to balance dirt and we can save $100,000 and oversize the pond, we could get a credit that could be applied and negotiated with future development, more likely to the south, because that's the drainage pattern. So we would kind of highlight that when we brought it back to you, but right now we're really focused on treating this area because we have the commitment and it makes sense. So we could always potentially expand the pond later if it was really advantageous. We have the space, but right now our primary goal is this parcel that you see on the screen.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
That was where I was going off Jeremy's thing too, was the potential to recoup any of our cost if there's development in the area that would use that pond as well.
I think we'll have a better sense of that that's always been our goal, to capitalize on efficiencies. We won't know until we start getting into the details on, you know, and some of the soil borings. We'll be coming back in January with a quote to do more soil borings on our part. So when we get into that, if it makes sense to oversize that, we'll definitely do that and highlight that when we bring it back and share that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, is it too early to talk trees and those kind of things in this general vicinity where everything is going? The road is obviously going to cut through and pull in close to those wetlands, and then obviously where the pond is, a pretty significant stand of trees and such. And is it too early to talk that right now? Is there a way that that retention pond could be longer and preserve more of those trees? All of the trees in that section, that this is all city property, even that forest.
Yes.
So do we have a future plan for that forest and such? And I only speak to that because of the recent clear cutting and stuff done south of our property here on the city hall, and then out by my place, just a ton of some pretty substantial stands of trees that are gone. Just asking those questions.
Good questions. A significant amount of that wooded area on the screen is city property. I don't know, at some point it tips to private property as you go east, but a significant amount is wooded. And my understanding is the intention of the city is to keep that wooded in all of our plans. We tried to push the road as far as we could and capitalize on the open space. There will be tree removals up as we're trying to make that alignment. That's a state aid road. And for safety reasons, we have to push that out a little bit, and we've planned for that. So there will be tree loss there. We can work to minimize, and that was a feasibility level, so we can work to minimize tree loss. If there's any critical areas, we have some more surveying to do as we move into design.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll work to minimize that and elongate it. But there will be some impacts there. But the rest of the wooded area for now is to be preserved. I don't, you know, it's not formally in a preservation easement or anything, but it's
Right.
within our
No,
control.
and I'm one that, a preservation type ordinance and stuff, I've experienced that and it doesn't work out. An incentive type thing for property owners to come and say, I'm keeping these stands of trees, and asking for maybe some changes or differences related to density, those kind of things. I'm all for that kind of incentive, but an ordinance, I experienced the one in a neighboring community, and we lost more trees than you could ever imagine. So, us as a city, we're being responsible, we're being thoughtful. Thank you for that. I have to ask that question. Thanks.
Anything else? All right, if not, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the cost share agreement for grading and sub-regional stormwater design and the associated engineering design services proposal for City Center Drive and 79th Place improvements in the amount of $36,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. 10D, public safety letter to Hennepin County. And Matt, if you want to give us some background on that.
So the police departments throughout Hennepin County have been tracking some significant increases in violent crime and serious property crimes that are happening throughout the county. Some of those also align with some policy changes that are happening at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Some of those specifically as it relates to not requiring bail for some of those crimes, and a few other items that have, several cities have expressed some significant concern. And many of the cities have talked about trying to start a dialogue with the county attorney's office to express those concerns, and that's really what this letter is intended for. So many of the cities are kind of banding together and sending the letters as a group, and I believe, like, for instance, the Southwest metro cities have already submitted some correspondence, and I think the intention is for some of the west and northwest suburbs to do the same, and that's a draft of that letter is what you see in front of you. Now, there's still, the specific content of that letter is still up for debate, because there are some cities that want to change some of the verbiage or take some of the edges off some of the things stated, but I think the sentiment is still the same. And we've been asked as police chiefs and public safety leaders to bring this letter to our mayors and elected officials to see if there's interest in sharing that same sentiment in unity with the other communities. And I do believe that on one of the letters already submitted, County Attorney Freeman has expressed a desire to work with the cities that did express that concern. I would expect that this may be received the same way, depending on what the final message is, but really seeking feedback from the council on any desire to sign on to this letter with the other communities, or choose another action, or choose to do nothing. So I wanted to kind of put that out there for you and kind of take the temperature from you guys to see what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I think it's a really important issue, and I think I'm fully in support of signing off on this. I don't know if you guys had any comments or questions for Matt on the content of the letter or more background there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'd rather it be from Corcoran, if that makes sense, and our thoughts and feelings on these things. A question that I have, are we seeing this same uptick in our statistics and those kind of things as a public safety person? Are we seeing these things in our community? Is it something you agree with, but in our writing, a personal letter from Corcoran and such?
Yeah, I think that's kind of, there's a lot of questions layered in that.
Yep, I'm trying to make it as simple as I can, but I know it's extremely complicated.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we're definitely seeing a lot more trickle over and spill over from just a general sentiment of, I guess, the criminal justice system in general. And I think this really works towards making sure that we're all working from the same sheet of music, because I think there's definitely been a perception from law enforcement and communities that they're, that the county attorney's office might be working off a different game plan than, Minneapolis versus Corcoran versus Edina. And I think that the reason for the communities really wanting to do this in unity is saying, while every one of our communities has its own struggles, Crystal's problems are different than our problems, are different than Edina's problems. All of us are experiencing these general problems, and it's really to drive home at the policy level, here's how we believe your policies are impacting our communities. So individually, I believe that we actually make a stronger statement by sharing the same message as the other communities on what our commonalities are. And certainly we have our own concerns with some of the county attorney's policies. I've voiced them with him in private and publicly, and there's no stranger there, but I think that can somehow detract from what's really trying to be driven home there when we, I don't want to say make ourselves a target, but make our own argument. We certainly do have our own unique issues, and I don't think this waters any of that down, and that's part of my job, is to continue to advocate for that. And keep, driving our point home on what our community problems are and what we're working on in Corcoran and how we're intending to do it. So I keep having those conversations with the county attorney and his staff when the opportunity presents itself. So I appreciate that, and I don't think this precludes us from sending our own. I just think that we'll have to be very articulate in what that is and how those policies are impacting it, and I think.
Okay. I've said it in the past and stuff, I've never locked my home. My automobiles sit outside, I'm a number of yards off my neighborhood road and stuff, but after some of the things that have happened, the doors are locked, the keys are put away, all of these things are done. I've had that country feel a long time, and I do want to talk to the citizens in town that I live in Corcoran, I don't need to do those things. Please help our public safety folks keep us safe and those kind of things, and start kind of policing your own property and lock things down and such. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I think just regarding the letter in general, I think it's a smart decision that we're speaking with some of the other cities and kind of having a somewhat unified voice on this, because frankly, if just the city of Corcoran were to send the county attorney a letter, we're not going to get a big response. But if, a number of these cities together are experiencing similar issues, that'll get their attention hopefully, and it sounds like initially it's started to. So hopefully we see a positive change in response to this. And
Yeah, I would agree with that comment, and I would suggest you may have to be careful if you write an individual letter to the city attorney not to prejudice views against the city of Corcoran by his office, but I would strongly suggest if they're wordsmithing this letter, you err on the side of not smoothing off the edges and stress the point as much as possible.
I agree.
People that have lived here for a long time are telling me that they're locking their doors now too, and they don't want to go out, and there's no way in heck people are going to go down to Minneapolis either, so
For sure.
I'd like to do whatever we can to prove that point. I guess I have a question to you is, in the news recently, the city attorney announced that he was allocating 2 prosecutors for juvenile crime, which we're seeing a lot of these instances appear to be. Do we see that as, is that going to make much of a dent?
I don't think that'll change much in Corcoran, for what we're doing. It's, I think to your earlier point about the message that this conveys, I've had individual conversations with all of you and have a pretty clear idea of your sentiments, and I advocate on what I believe to be the city's viewpoint pretty fervently on there. And so I balance, I think if there are group discussions on that, I've leaned exactly as you said, that we need to be explicit about what our concerns are. And those are really in line with the conversations that I'm hearing from all of you. So I think that we would probably land on the stronger side of the wording. Others might lean towards, different ways of getting to the solution is why they're trying to change the wording. But I think at the end of the day, the sentiment holds true all the way through. I think, the county attorney has mentioned a number of initiatives that he's undertaken that he says will directly impact this, and I think that you really, unless you're involved in it to see what's semantics and what's politics and what's actually happening, it's hard to see through that. And from a general public standpoint, the general public might not understand the difference between, a robbery and a theft of a car, and where, when bail is being required, when it's not, and what the volume of, theft of a car with keys left in it versus somebody being removed from their car that's driving it. Those are explicitly different offenses and are treated differently, as they should be. However, there's a lot of wordsmithing in some of the messaging that addresses one thing but not another thing, and that's, you have to be somewhat, follow the facts of what are happening. And I think this really can maybe hopefully start the conversation of people saying, no, we're following here, this is what we're seeing, and these are the downstream outcomes. And we can, as police departments, bring our records together and show that in this instance, this person was, released without bail and committed this over in this other community. And in the past, not all police departments or places share records, and I think that as we're starting to see this uptick, we need to take that holistic, comprehensive approach, and we're not going to do it as communities on our own. We need our partnership with the county attorney, and we need to make sure that that he hears our voice and what our concerns are in our communities, and that not only are individual issues unique to our community, but they're also presented and manifested in a different way than Minneapolis's issues or Crystal's issues. And we need to be able to articulate how that plays out here and what we think would help us here. And I don't know if John has anything to add, please jump in, or if I'm misstating or something needs to be said differently, please.
No,
in the right direction.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think it's fairly stated. I agree with Matt that I think that kind of the strength in numbers is important on something like this, and having, taken the direction from the council that it's important to make sure that the message is received, even if that's perceived a little bit as having an edge. But doing it as a joint effort, I think will speak a little stronger, because I know Matt kind of tirelessly advocates on this, but sometimes it feels like, well, is it just Matt complaining, or is it a broader problem? And this suggests the latter, so.
All right. Anything else? I'll go ahead and make the motion to authorize staff to electronically sign the letter.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 10E, the 2021 year in review.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 2021 was a big year for the city of Corcoran. In the packet is a very long list of our wonderful accomplishments that the staff and council has done here, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them and show a couple pictures that were taken throughout the year. We hit over 1,000 permits this year, with a week and a half left to go. We still have some permits in process, so we're seeing record numbers of permits. New homes as of last Friday was 279, and we started to release for the Tavera project. So I anticipate that we'll have even more new homes by the end of the year gone through. We completed the City Hall remodel, which was a large project that ended in 2 phases, and we were able to move staff and get some additional space for us for the next few years. We started implementing new software systems, which will be online in 2022, which will help with a variety of ways of getting staff to be more efficient and effective, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of that, as well as online permitting and some great things we're doing with that. We hired Maggie Young, our finance manager, and Natalie Davis, and Jody Peterson. Hired all 3 of those folks from the administration department. In the public works world, we recognize Clyde has been here 30 years. It's a big accomplishment for Clyde Bechtold. We appointed Mike Pritchard and Eric Gregory to positions within the Public Works Department. We had a lot of continued development from Ravinia to Bass Lake Crossing to Bass Lake Crossing South, Bellwether, Tavera, Rush Creek Reserve, Nelson International, a lot of projects that Public Works and Engineering was involved in. We paved roads in Corcoran, which is a big deal. So we paved Appaloosa Woods and Corcoran Trail East and West. So kudos to us for getting some paving done. It may have taken 30 years, but we're getting there. Yeah.
I'll add to that, it seemed to be received favorably by the neighborhoods as well.
That is a great point.
And got a petition for a 3rd one, so.
And a petition for a 3rd one, which will be bringing forward that feasibility study and the results of that in the next coming months.
Cool.
We did some water supply planning, parks planning. We're working on the Bellwether boardwalk RFP, so we'll be seeing that come out. Jessica's been working on that. And master planning for parks as well. Public safety had a really big year with a variety of changes in staff. We appointed Clay Decker to a full-time permanent position of police officer, Pete Eckenberg to sergeant. Jacob Anderson started as a CSO for us in March, and then was later appointed to the police officer position. Josh Lawson was appointed to police officer. Amy Fadden was appointed to police technician. Corey Andrus to the position of our 2nd sergeant. And then we have 2 new community service officers, Danny Mowens and Ryan Swanson, as well as Abigail Edstrom as our part-time police officer. So we've had a lot of change in the police department, but a really exciting time since sergeants. We've never had a sergeant position before to give us some more depth within our police department, and we've not had CSOs before, so giving us some added depth to the police department and opportunity to do different things. Another big thing with the police department is we implemented body-worn cameras. That was no small feat to implement. Matt and his team did a great job with that, and we're continuing to utilize those. Zeke got back out and has been reintegrated into the police department as our canine with Handler Decker. And then we've done, one thing that's not mentioned in here but should be, is we've done a lot of fire service planning. So we've been continuing to move forward on fire service planning. So Between the three departments, a lot of different things and a lot of different developments. In the packet list a few of the different developments, but we had our last final phase of Ravinia, we had an Amberley and Bellwether, we saw Napa come in, and a variety of other smaller projects come in. So we had a very big planning year for us as well. And we look forward to 2022 and hope for continued success, and thank the council for your support. And I have to thank our team here. We have a wonderful team on staff, from department heads all the way down. We have a great team, and we couldn't do it without the support of the group. So.
Thank you guys. And you guys too. Great year. Got a lot done. And
Yeah.
excited for 2022.
Yeah, there's even more stuff on here that, that they did that's not mentioned, you know, ordinance updates. I was gonna ask public safety, do we have a firearms field day this year?
I don't, as in coming up in 22 or in 21?
In 21?
A lot of the programming has been on hold in 21, and I don't remember if we did I know there were field days. I don't remember if they were ours or if we had just Orono's or not, if we held one of those this year or not, because we did, you know, truck safety is always in flux, and some of those optional programs got put on hold because of COVID. And
Yeah. I know we didn't have a classroom training.
right, I think that we did a remote, I think we did do a field day outside, but we didn't do the classroom part this year where they, you know, they can do an online portion, and I think that it was better than nothing, but it wasn't as great as the whole program as we can,
Right.
as we can usually do. But that was, you know, to your point, we worked through a lot of adversity and the things that we were able to get done, and we didn't, you know, while 2020 put most of those projects off, we did the best we could in 21 as far as, you know, taking our Night to Unite on the road and, you know, trying to do the field day and some of those things that, to whatever degree we felt was appropriate and still safe for the community.
Yeah. To the extent we can do it, firearm safety in next year, I'd say we can make that an effort, because this firearm safety program is one of the best in the area.
Gotcha.
It's pretty well known, and there's definitely a gap in that out there and a need for it for
Yeah.
you know, upcoming kids that want to participate in the outdoors or just get a general sense of firearm safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we agree with you with that value. And right now, our greatest challenge and the planning efforts are underway, but we need to find a space, a classroom space, with losing our community center. Where do we have a space big enough to do that? And search is on. So if any of you guys have any other suggestions, we have a couple of leads on a few different locations, but we're going to keep working forward on it. So any input from you or the community is welcome.
How big of a space do we need for something like that?
It depends on what I mean, we would fill up the previous community center,
Okay.
and that space would actually end up being a little bit small at times. I would anticipate there could be some pent-up demand for the course, based on the lack of availability in the last couple of years. So I would say no smaller than our previous community center.
We use this room as well as
Yeah,
what
the
Kevin's
entrance
room.
too.
So,
I've got a barn.
There you go.
Sounds good. We'll
Brainstorm some.
we'll make sure we add it to the list to check out.
Can Public Works empty a couple of bays on those nights and set up tables, those kind of things? I don't know if you've thought about that, but I know we're limited space out there too, but
Yeah, we can connect as the process goes, and
Yeah.
I think the frequency and stuff potentially is a limitation, but if it comes to that, I mean, we're communicating regularly if it's, I guess, to be determined.
Yeah, we've talked about that a few times. The hard part is that most often they're staging for the next day's projects the night before.
Yeah.
And that really ties up their space, and I can appreciate their.
So again,
so.
48 by 80 barn. I can pack a lot of people in there, man.
Thank you.
yeah, it's like 4 hours every Sunday for
Yep.
what, 8 weeks or something like that, so. It's a good commitment, you're gonna get it. Appreciate it.
I'm open. I'm fully supporting that gun safety. I've been through it twice with the city and had it back in 1972, so I'm all for, especially what we do in our city and what you guys do, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right,
Well, thank you all. We appreciate the
Congratulations,
support.
well done.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, 10F, which was added to the agenda,
Yes.
the authorization for a plow.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. We ended up with a truck, one of our pickup trucks that has a plow attached to it, needed to go in for repairs, and they're waiting on some parts for us. And so we are looking for authorization tonight to get a plow. We have other trucks set up that have the capability to put on plows. We just, at the time, didn't feel like we needed a spare, but now we're at a point where we feel like we need a spare, and we would likely, that spare would go into service as a full-time, another pickup truck as we continue to grow. So what's a spare today will be part of the fleet in the future. And so we're really looking today, we did get a quote for, I think, $7,800 was the final number that we got on a quote on state contract. So we're really looking for council approval to go forward with getting that spare plow. There might be a little bit of labor in that, so we were thinking originally not to exceed 10,000, but we could certainly lower that if we need to.
Gotcha.
One of our fundamental responsibilities.
Yes,
So-
we want to make sure we can. We were, actually, when we were talking about it, we were even having some times locating the plows. Pat had to call multiple vendors today. I happened to be out there today when he was making those calls, and it's with the logistical issues that we're seeing due to the pandemic, plows are not one of those things that have escaped those logistical challenges.
I feel like nothing has. Hard to get anything.
So what type of plow is it, and what width is it?
I can pull it up. It's basically mimicking what we've bought, and all the CIPs we're trying to convert into that. So it would go on the front end of a pickup truck and block
Right.
plow cul-de-sacs.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm wondering is, you can buy different widths of plows. Are we buying one that's too big to plow trails in the future? You know what I mean? If we've got because we haven't really talked about plowing public trails, right, in parks?
Yep.
And some cities use pickups with a plow on the front to do that when you're talking large lengths of trails, so.
That broken V-plow adjusts.
Well,
I mean, they
either
can
that
go
or-
this way, put the V on, yeah.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
are we talking like a 9-foot plow that might be too wide
Right.
versus an 8-foot plow?
I've seen a lot of the neighboring communities have the V-plows on them, where you can have it a straight blade.
Sure.
And then the V-plow, which they're
Or make
using
it
it
a
to go
scoop,
down the
yeah.
roads. Or they can even fold in
Yeah.
and gather and then make it to a certain point and then it opens up. But it all depends on how big it is and is it a 1-ton truck? Is it a 3/4 ton and stuff? And that's all Kevin
Yeah.
is looking at that right now.
It's 8 feet wide, so our trails are 8 feet wide, so it would work. We are planning our trail maintenance. We have had some CIP budget allocated to that. We're kind of gonna test out a couple options here over the coming years. I think next year we'd actually likely anticipate trail maintenance in the new developments, so we're planning for that. This plow is 8 feet wide. We are, as we continue to kind of overturn stuff, we're making sure that our plows are compatible to be swapped out. So sometimes the electronics don't always work in different setups. And unfortunately, this of all our pickup trucks that went out was the only one that wasn't compatible to do that. So we are paying attention to that and, being able to in the future swap that out and move it around efficiently. This was just, we didn't have a backup one, and it was the one truck that we couldn't really adjust to due to some of the electronic components, so.
Gotcha.
This is essentially a pre-order that we're just asking to move up from a future CIP. And we don't want to go 2 or 3 months without being able to
Yeah.
efficiently plow cul-de-sac. So we felt like it was warranted to bring forward in the rush notice. So.
especially at the end of December.
And I think we found like maybe one of the only ones left in the Midwest, so, you know, even a
Awesome.
3-week delay in looking for that, we might have had problems, so.
Are we looking to install it ourselves?
I believe we do, yeah, I think this just includes delivery, but we swap those around off.
Okay.
So, yeah, this would be, I believe we'd be all in at the 78, 88 number. So
Okay.
we would handle any other stuff, at least what's foreseen at this point. So, a little bit of a scramble today.
Are we all comfortable with the 10,000 number just to be safe, or do we want to put that down a bit?
I trust staff's discretion to get the best price they can.
Yep, for sure. Anything else in the plow? I'll go ahead and make the motion to authorize staff to purchase a plow on state contract for, or total not to exceed $10,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Staff reports, I think there was a financial
Yes.
performance
Thank you.
report?
Mayor and council, we just had included the financial performance report for the end of the year. At this time, we're looking at a budget surplus. We will have a better idea of that as we get through the audited financials, and any the last month purchases that happened in December here are not included. But at this time, we're at least projecting a budget surplus of some amount at this time, which could vary from this report, but that's what we're envisioning at this time.
Sounds good. And we didn't do quite as, we weren't quite as off as the state was with $7.7 billion surplus.
Yes, we had a bit of one. One of the things that is always challenging for us when we do our budget, there's a bit of wages when we had some folks out, but also building permits do fluctuate a bit, and we tend to be conservative on those, but there were, I would say, staff wages is part of it, and then building permits and another variety of items played into that.
Makes sense. Okay. Anything else? All right. I'll go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, for coming. Appreciate it.
Recording stopped.
Meeting, but.